Alright, my friends, I have made a chart on my board to help us keep track of all of the things we're learning about the different seasons. At the very top, I've written northern seasons because remember, we're talking about seasons in the northern hemisphere. We have got spring, summer, fall or autumn, and winter. We're going to start with spring. We're going to fill in some information about spring. The first thing we're going to talk about in spring is the date that spring begins. Spring begins during a special day where there is equal amounts of daylight and darkness in the day. It is called an equinox, or the spring equinox. The spring equinox usually happens, it doesn't happen at the same day every single year, but it usually happens around March 21st. During the spring, how much sunshine do we get? Do we get as much sunshine as we get during the summer? Not quite. But during springtime, just like during the equinox, we get roughly the same amount of daytime and darkness each day. Blend into summer a little. During the spring, what are the temperatures like? Remember, spring follows winter, which is very cold, and in the spring, our temperature starts to get warmer. It starts to heat up a little bit. Our next season is summer. The first date of summer is the summer solstice. Remember, in the summer solstice, we have more daylight than darkness. It is the longest day of the year. That happens usually around June 21st. Again, it's not always on June 21st, but it usually happens around June 21st. In the summer, amount of sunshine. In the summer, do we have more darkness or more daylight? In the summer, we have more daylight. Then we do darkness. In the summer we have longer days, and our days are also what kind of temperature? Are they cool? In the summer we have hotter days. Our days get hotter and hotter in the summer. As the summer turns to fall, let's start at the bottom on fall. What happens to our temperatures? Our temperatures, after they've been getting hotter, start to get cooler. They start to cool down. Fall starts during the autumn equinox. So we have the spring equinox and the autumn equinox. The autumn equinox usually happens around September 21st. Not always, but it's usually when it happens. In an equinox, how much sunshine do we get? In an equinox, we have equal amounts of sunshine and darkness. Not quite even, not all the time, but roughly equal amounts. As fall turns into winter, winter starts with the winter solstice, not the summer solstice, but the winter solstice. The winter solstice usually happens around December 21st. During the winter time, do we usually have more or less sunshine in the day? During the winter, we have less daylight than we do darkness. Our temperatures started cooling down in the fall. In the winter, those temperatures get even colder. All right, my friends, today we are going to learn a little bit more about our seasons and how they cycle or how they work throughout the year. Before we do that, though, we need to go over our vocabulary words. Minimum. Minimum is the least amount possible. Bake the cookies for a minimum of 10 minutes. Otherwise, they might be too soft inside. Migrate. Migrate means to move from one place to another. The flocks of wild geese prepare to migrate south before the first snow of each winter. Absorbed. Absorbed means took in or soaked up. Sunlight and water are both absorbed by plants. Photosynthesis. When plants use sunlight to turn water and air into food, we call it photosynthesis. Plants use photosynthesis to make their own food. Adapt means to change or adjust to make it easier to live in one's environment. See if you can think of a word that means the opposite of adapt. What about a word that means the same thing, a synonym for adapt? Turn to whoever is helping you today and tell them about how you have adapted to second grade. What are some of the differences between first and second grade? How do you think you will adapt next year when you go to third grade? Do you know why many plants grow more rapidly during the summer and more slowly, or not at all, during the winter? Or why some animals migrate, whereas others will hibernate? When an animal migrates, it leaves to spend winter in a warmer place. When an animal hibernates, it finds a special place to rest until spring. Only certain parts of our planet have seasons. This is because of the shape and tilt of the Earth. The region around the equator receives the greatest amount of direct, intense sunlight. This region of Earth is called a tropical region because it is almost always hot and humid. The North and South poles receive the least amount of direct sunlight. They are the polar regions of Earth. Generally, they remain cold and dry. In recent years, however, as Earth's overall climate has changed and has become warmer, the polar regions are warming up too,
and some of the ice caps in this region have been melting. The region between the poles, on either side of the equator, is called the temperate region. In this region of the world, where we live, most places experience all 4 seasons of the year. Remember, during the time of year when the northern hemisphere is tilted toward the sun, this part of our world receives more daylight and more intense sunlight. This means that it is summertime in the northern hemisphere. At the same time, the southern hemisphere is tilted away from the sun, so it is winter there. That's why, as Earth revolves around the sun and is tilted on an axis, the seasons change. Now let's discover more information about each specific season. As each year passes in the temperate region of the world, changes occur in the weather. These weather cycles have been divided up into what we call the seasons. Each season brings with it incredible changes in the world around us. In spring, daylight hours increase and the sunlight becomes much stronger. With warmer weather, more rain begins to fall. With increased light, warmth, and rain, plants begin to grow again. Seeds resting in the soil begin to take root. The warmth from the sun and the rainfall enables plant seeds to germinate or begin to grow into plants. You have probably heard the saying, April showers bring May flowers. New plants emerge, and plants that have been inactive for the winter become active and start growing again. As buds and leaves form, the water the plant has absorbed travels up the stem to the leaves. Plants use water and sunlight to make their own food, as well as oxygen for us to breathe. This process is called photosynthesis. It is during springtime that this great burst of life and energy occurs. Springtime also sees the return of animals that had migrated or moved to warmer places during the winter time. It is also the time when some animals wake up from their winter hibernation. Spring is when many animals give birth to their young. Animals give birth either by bearing live young or by laying eggs. Animals that give birth to live young have nourished their young inside their bodies. Animals that hatch from eggs have been nourished by a yolk within the egg. Because the northern hemisphere receives more intense sunlight from the sun at a more direct angle in the summer, temperatures are usually at their highest during these months. With the increase of light and heat in the summer, plants grow big and strong. Young animals are born and grow strong during this fruitful time as well. As the earth revolves and summer turns to autumn, both the temperature and the environment begin to change again. In autumn, while it is still warm, light from the sun is not as intense, and the growth and development of plants and animals begins to slow down. Remember, living things thrive with sunlight, so when there is less sunlight, some plants and animals don't grow as quickly or cannot grow at all. In many places in the northern hemisphere, autumn is a time to harvest the crops that have grown and ripened beneath the summer sun. Grass crops are harvested, and grapes are picked from vines. Fruits such as apples, pears, and pumpkins are ready to be eaten. As the amount of daylight lessens and the temperature continues to drop, the leaves of many trees change color. During this time in many parts of the northern hemisphere, a world of copper, bronze, red, and orange leaves is a sight to behold. Leaves change color in autumn because deciduous trees receive less sunshine than they need to produce food, and photosynthesis stops. When photosynthesis stops, these leaves begin to die and fall off. Therefore, deciduous trees that have leaves that change color and fall off. When winter arrives, It means that this part of Earth is now tilted away from the sun, and temperatures and sunlight are at a minimum. It also means that summer has arrived in the southern hemisphere. Because conditions are less favorable for living things in winter, growth and development slows down and even stops. During winter, deciduous trees rely on the food they previously produced and convert it into energy. This food supply is stored in their roots. During winter, deciduous trees, as well as many other plants, enter a dormant state. In winter, some animals whose food source is affected by the change in climate migrate or leave for warmer places. These animals sense the change in daylight and temperature and begin their annual migration. Migration is a part of a yearly cycle of changes. Some birds, for example, travel long distances to their winter homes. They prepare for their migration by eating lots of food they can store as energy to use on their journey. Mammals such as caribou and elk migrate across vast expanses of land, and even fish migrate in winter in search of warmth and food. Like many plants that lay dormant in winter, there are animals that hibernate. Hibernation is a kind of deep sleep. Like the deciduous trees, animals that hibernate rely on the food they have stored in their bodies to get them through the winter months. There are also animals that stay in their natural habitat throughout the colder months and survive as best they can. Animals such as foxes, deer, and rabbits search for food on the frozen land. Some build snug homes to keep out the cold. They have learned to adapt or adjust to their ever-changing environment. People adapt too. They prepare for the cold months ahead by wearing warmer clothes and even changing the foods they eat. How do you prepare for autumn and winter? We are all part of this never-ending cycle. When spring returns, the cycle of growth will begin all over again, and new life will appear on the earth.
All right, my friends, let's finish filling out this chart with the information that we learned from our story today, our read aloud today. So we've talked about our 4 seasons, the date that they begin, the amount of sunshine that we get during those seasons, and what the temperature is like during those seasons. Our next section on our chart is plants. Remember, the cycle of the seasons affects plants and animals. Plants, we'll start with plants. In the springtime, what happens to plants? Plants start to grow. One thing that happens in springtime is trees get new leaves as they start to grow. Flowers start to bloom. And crops are planted. Springtime is when farmers plant their crops. Growing up, my mom always had a flower garden, and she would need to plant her flowers in the spring. And then they would bloom towards the end of the spring, and we would have flowers through the summer. In the summer, plants are able to absorb more sunlight because there's more direct sunlight that we're receiving. And plants are able to absorb that sunlight and grow more. In the fall, our trees, we'll talk about trees first in the fall. Our trees get new leaves in the spring. They keep those leaves in the summer. What happens to those leaves in the fall? they change color to beautiful reds and yellows and oranges and browns. In the fall, our leaves change color. In the fall is also when we harvest crops. So the farmers plant them in the spring, they grow through the summer, and then in the fall they are harvested or plucked or gathered from the fields where they are growing. In the winter, those beautiful leaves start to fall, and many plants die. Many plants cannot survive the harsh, cold temperatures of the winter and will die. Some plants are able to withstand the winter coldness, but most flowers and small plants will die in the winter time. What about animals? What happens with animals in the springtime? Birds that fly away for the winter return. Animals that have hibernated wake up. And springtime is when a lot of animals have babies. If you look around in the springtime, up in the mountains, you'll see lots of baby animals. That's when most animals have babies, is in the spring. In the summer, the animals that have babies in the spring will spend their summer raising their babies. In the fall, a lot of birds will fly away in preparation for the cold winter months. And other animals will collect food so that they have a store of food for the long winter. In the winter, many animals hibernate. Remember, to hibernate means to hide away for the winter and stay warm inside. And there are not as many birds. Some birds will stay, but most birds will fly away. Our last column is about what humans do in the seasons and what kind of clothes we wear. Some activities that humans do in the spring, I talked about one. A lot of humans will plant gardens, like my mother. What other things do you do in the springtime? Do you play outside when it's warm enough? What about in the summer? What are some things that you do in the summer? Do you spend more time outside in the summer? I know I do. One of my favorite things to do in the summer is to go swimming. What other things do you like to do in the summer? What kind of clothes do you wear in the summer? Do you wear lots of really heavy layers? No, in the summer we usually wear lighter clothes because it's so warm. In the fall, we start to wear a couple more layers. We'll wear light jackets or cardigans like this one. In the fall, we usually go back to school. I like to play in the leaves in the fall. What about in the winter? In the winter, we wear lots of layers and lots of warm clothing. What things do you like to do in the winter? Do you like to go sledding? Or maybe build a snowman? What about ice skating? Do you like to ice skate? I love to go ice skating, but I don't do it very often and I'm not very good at it. But that's okay, I still think it's lots of fun to go. Alright, my friends, there is no assignment today. We'll do one more activity and then you will be finished with knowledge after this last part of our video.
Alright, before we go today, my friends, I want to talk a little bit about compound words. A compound word is what happens when we have two words that are added together to form a new word. If you know the meaning of each of the individual two words in a compound word, you'll most likely be able to figure out the meaning of the compound word. In our examples here, we have the compound word bedtime. Bedtime is a combination of the words bed and time, and it means time to go to bed. Our next example says notebook. Notebook is a combination of the words note and book, and it means a book in which you write notes. Our last example is the word homework, which is a combination of the words home and work, and it means work that you do at home. In our read aloud today, we heard the compound word springtime. What are the two words that make up the word springtime? You've got it, spring and time. Spring is the season with flowers, and time is when you do something. Springtime then means the time when there are flowers. What about winter time? What are the two words that make up winter time? And what do you think that one means? Turn and tell whoever's helping you today. What does winter time mean? All right, my friends, as you are reading, be on the lookout for those compound words. And if you're unsure of what it means, look at each of the words that make up the compound word and see if that helps you figure it out. That is it for today. I will see you guys next time.